Well, I guess it's time to go live. I hope this is working. Let's see if I put my earphones in, which I should have done a while ago, and take down the green screen. Not going to use that today. Things aren't always as they appear. Um, I'm, of course, not trying to do anything deceptive here, but, I use the green screen for little entertainment value. Now, there is some deception that goes on in politics. How much? I don't really know. Nobody knows because it's deceptive. Some of the people doing it have a pretty good idea. Some of the people not doing it also have a pretty good idea. The rest of the people, I'm not so sure. But there are some things that I think are not really so much intended to be deceptive as they just end up that way. Like, for example, when people tell you that you can support their campaign or their YouTube channel or whatever by sending money, that's not the only way. There are other ways. For example, I would hope most people know that have watched enough YouTube channels that you can support a channel by watching its videos, by sharing it with other people, um, by recommending it if you think it's worth recommending. Maybe even by sending in an idea to the person running it if they seem to be short on ideas. Keep in mind, the bigger channels probably get so many ideas sent into them that they don't even have time to look at most of them. And of course, some people might take it as insulting that you sent them an idea, as if like you think they can't come up with one on their own. But it is still a thing you can try to do if you choose to. Doesn't cost you anything but some of your time and a little bit of effort. Likewise, when it comes to political campaigns, you can support political campaigns in ways other than sending them money. But what is a political campaign anyway? Well, here, let's see. I should be able to bring this up on the screen. Give me just a moment. Can I zoom in on this at all? Not seeing a way to do that. But yeah, let me just share a screen here for a moment. And let's see, right there. I pulled this up before I started the video, and before I started live streaming. And this is a definition I got just by running a search on the internet. It says campaign, noun, an organized course of action to achieve a goal. There's nothing political about that. That's the number one definition that came up. Now, different dictionaries, different sources are going to define things in slightly different ways, sometimes drastically different ways. But what about that? Says, anything about having to be a political campaign by some candidate, like, the way it generally tends to get used in the subject of supporting a campaign. What about your own campaign, your own goals, the things you'd like to get done? We'll get back to that. Definition number two says a series of military operations intended to achieve a particular objective, confined to a particular area or involving a specified type of fighting. And then there's the verb campaign, work in an organized and active way toward a particular goal, typically a political or social one. So basically, a campaign is a plan and action to support that plan to try to achieve something, things that you would like to achieve. I have talked in the past about the People's Campaign, which is something that I call, oh, hi, Tammy. I when I say the people's campaign, I don't mean something organized by one person for all the other people to follow. I mean each person doing their own campaigning for their own thing. Now, yeah, if somebody else is campaigning for something that is exactly what you want, and if you have the money to throw at it and you want to throw them some money and say, here, use my money to do that better. If you got more money than time, do that if you feel like it. But that should be your personal choice. If somebody is campaigning for something that's sort of what you want, but not really, or it's close to what you want, but not quite, keep in mind that you can campaign for exactly what you want. If you have money to put into it, you can get some signs made of your own with wording you choose. You can go to a friend and ask them, hey, do you have a better way I could word this? Get some help with your campaign. Let someone support your campaign. Again, doesn't need to involve money. Now, I'm not saying it can't, but keep in mind when you support a campaign financially, when you, oh, I was going to use the term finance a campaign, but I'll get back to that too. That can also be deceptive. But when you financially support a campaign, keep in mind that unless you're the richest person on the planet, somebody can outdo you in that respect easily. Somebody has way more money than you and way more money to spare, because that's the thing about having that much money, is most of it is money you can spare. Most of us don't have that, but what we do have is the ability to make an effort of our own. And well, I would recommend that. Tammy, did you have any questions? I'm looking at Tammy R over in the chat, in the live chat, in case anybody's wondering. I think, well, let's see. Not sure how that works while I'm using StreamYard. It's been a while since I've checked it out. If I post something in there, I think it shows up in the live chat and in the comments. Not really sure. Maybe it was just in the live chat. I could put a link to this if anybody wants to consider joining the live stream and talking with me on air. Just let me know and I can post a link to it, and hopefully you'll get it. I'm going to go ahead and remove this definition from the screen. Not that everybody needs a better look at me, but so yeah, I don't really know exactly what all I want to say, but I do have a lot of things to say. It's just I didn't write them down and script this. Tammy says, I just saw you were on and popped in to watch. I shared on Twitter also. Thank you, Tammy. That's exactly what I was just saying. You can support things without having to throw money at them. Anybody can. There are different ways, and there are ways that a person can, spend some of their own money to support something a little better. But then they get to choose exactly how that money is spent. If you send money to someone, and I'm not saying don't, again, if you can afford it and you think it's the right thing to do with your money, by all means, do what you think is best. I'm just saying, don't feel like you can't help just because you don't have enough money to throw at somebody else trying to get something done. Most of us are in that position most of the time, where we really can't afford to just give someone else money and say, hey, you're doing something close to what I want done, so here's some money to help you do it. Unfortunately, the way our politics is set up, there's a lot that goes into campaign financing that kind of has to be done only because of the fact that it's like we've got this dichotomy going on where it's one side against another side, and the people aren't generally on either side. But whichever side scares you the most, yeah, you're probably going to want to throw some money at the other side if you can afford to, because they're fighting against the scarier one. Some people see them both as pretty much equally scary, so then they're just stuck when it comes to figuring out what to do with that. But yeah, uh, if you see something that some politician has once talked about doing and it hasn't been followed up on, follow up on it on their behalf. If you can figure out how to write up something resembling legislation and send it their way, or send it to some other politician and say, hey, this thing seems to have disappeared. Nobody seems to be working on it. So here's my rendition. Uh, don't worry about whether or not you've done it right, because they've got people who can straighten it out, and they'll probably change it whether you want them to or not. But at least then it starts out a way that you personally like, something about it at least, because you wrote it, and that's a thing you can do. Um, you can talk to people about things you think should be changed, um, how to make the world a better place. All of us can, and that's a campaign as well. If you make it one, if you decide I've got a goal of making the world a better place, of making a better future for humanity, that's your campaign, and you can support your own campaign by campaigning for it, by doing actions to support the thing to support the path toward that goal. Yeah, come to think of it, I could have shared this on on Twitter myself, and I didn't do that. Well, any rate, but Tammy did, and that's cool. Um, Again, thank you for that. Yeah, I don't expect to get a lot of views on here. um, my Eminent Reflection channel is kind of new, doesn't really have a lot of followers. My older channel, Donald Kronos, has been around a while. I had not been making videos on either one of them for quite a while, which is why for a few videos now I'm simulcasting, live streaming on both of them. I don't intend to keep that up, but just to kind of make up for the fact that I haven't been live streaming at all for some time, health issues and such. And well, I'm trying to get back into it on a somewhat regular basis now, hopefully. And yeah, do the best I can with it. But yeah, as I was saying earlier, things aren't always as they seem. When I mentioned the financing a campaign. A particular now ex-president, um, who recently was president of the United States and isn't anymore, even though he seems to still be, um, told people that he was financing his own campaign, and a lot of people thought that meant that they didn't nobody needed to donate to his campaign because he donated his own money. Well, no. When he asks you to finance his campaign, then he's asking for money to be donated. What he did was he loaned money to his campaign with interest. Financing, like when you're buying a house and you can't afford it, and the bank finances your house, they want that money back with a whole lot of interest. So, again, a little deceptive there. Okay, a lot deceptive. Tammy says, I wrote to Biden asking for the tax laws to be um, reversed to allow us to be able to write off our union dues again. Generic response, but nothing else. Oh, um, is that meant reversed or revised? Well, it says reversed. I don't know. Generic response, but nothing else. I, I'm not familiar with that particular tax law, but yeah, that's one thing you can do. You can also call the White House comment line, which unfortunately is only open 3 days a week, 3 hours a day. on those days, but you can leave a comment that way. Don't expect it to reach who it's supposed to reach. Don't expect results, but try, because it doesn't hurt to try, and you might get results. But don't stop there. I would say, call your senator about it as well. Well, you've got two state senators. They are technically there to represent the state, not to represent you. But you are one person who lives in that state, and the former guy. Yeah, okay. I know he made some pretty nasty changes in those tax laws, and yeah, I hope Biden or someone soon does revise a lot of the damage that he did, and like you said, reverse it, undo the damage to whatever extent possible. I know he's done a few things like that. Off the top of my head, I couldn't say exactly what, but I have been paying attention, and I've noticed some. But there was a lot of damage done. There's a lot left to undo. But yeah. Well, example. See that Bernie sign in the background? Is it really there? Again, things aren't always as they appear. I again don't I don't intend to deceive anyone. Yes, I'm using some camera manipulation. I'm using little computation to affect my image somewhat for entertainment purposes. Um, you know, a magician who gets on a stage and does things that fool people, not for the sake of fooling them, but for the sake of entertaining them, and makes no secret of the fact that they're tricking the eyes and stuff like that. Nothing wrong with that. One who tries to make themselves out as having been born with magical abilities, and they're using the powers of their mind to do things, without the help of their body, stuff like that. They should be ashamed. That's all I'm saying about that. Um, what damage? The freak is asking what damage. Um, well, for one, there was a whole lot of money given to the super rich. A whole lot of regulations removed. Okay, this isn't one. Um, as Tammy was mentioning, the tax changes. Um, really, the list goes on and on. The pandemic should have been over by now. It's mainly due to the United States and our poor handling of the COVID-19 pandemic that the world wasn't able to get rid of it. And here we are now with it basically having become an endemic pandemic. Uh, and we will probably have to live with it until our extinction, whenever that happens to come. Now, maybe, just maybe, with enough advances in our technology, we might still beat it someday, but likely not anytime in the near future. And as the virus continues to evolve, there remains the possibility that some strain of it might wipe us out. Um, and that's not far fetched. The archaeological evidence does indicate that humankind, once came extremely close to being wiped out by a virus. Um, a lot of the evidence is in our own genetics. We still have evidence of that virus in our genetics. No, I don't believe COVID-19 was Donald Trump's fault. I don't believe COVID-19 was any human being's fault. It actually is a virus that was evolving in a bat population, and bats are mammals like humans. They're rather closely related to us, not as closely as, say, um, other apes, not as closely as a chimpanzee, for example, which is very, very closely related to us. But bats are pretty closely related to us, and a virus that can infect a bat has generally a reasonable chance of being able to infect a human as well. A lower chance. because it's evolving in a bat population, but still a chance. And it was known that the virus was endemic among bats. Not known by everyone, but I mean it was known. Um, there were people who were watching that particular bat um, virus, that version that was among the bat population, watching it evolve. They took samples of it. They did testing on it. They checked it with, um, you know, I think they did some testing with human cells to see if it would multiply in human cells, but that's like human cells in a petri dish, in an isolated environment where they kill them afterward. And because they wanted to know, how dangerous is this to us? And a lot of that testing, a lot of that experimentation, a lot of that knowledge they gained did help us to reduce the damage that the pandemic caused. But in and of itself, it wasn't enough. There were things that could have been done that we could have wiped it out. Um, what's lurking and waiting in all the glacier ice melting? Yeah, there's that, Tammy. We don't know. There are going to be viruses locked away in that ice that get loose. And will they infect something that's alive today? Odds are probably most of them won't find anything that they can infect. Um, but viruses tend to happen in really large numbers. And so most of them not managing to find a way doesn't mean none of them will. And yeah, that's something I don't think anybody really has the means to calculate. Just how much danger is that right now? Yes, deer and dogs getting COVID from us, and yes, that is tragic. Yeah, we humans are passing the COVID-19 virus on to a lot of other animals, and and each other species that we pass on the COVID-19 virus to. And again, it's not something that will happen readily, but it can happen. The more we interact with another species, the more likely we're going to pass on some slight variant of the virus that mutated in just the right way that it can manage to survive in that animal well enough to continue its evolution from there. And with every new species that we manage to infect with the COVID-19 virus, that's one more reservoir that the virus lives in. So even if we do wipe it out in the human population, it will still have a chance of reinfecting us from there. And the smart thing to do, looking back at it, and for some people looking forward at it as well, because I'm sure there were people who thought this when they were doing the studies on it in the bat population. The smart thing to do would be to try to wipe it out in the bat population before humans caught it from them. We didn't do that. And this is an example of how it helps to not just think of yourself. If we would have thought about those bats, if we would have unselfishly just said, you know what, that virus isn't hurting those bats badly, but it's hurting them. Let's get rid of it. It's not doing them any good. It's not doing anything else any good. Let's get rid of it. Make them a little more comfortable. If it helps them survive a little bit longer, and we have to take measures to hold back their population somehow, then deal with that. But if we just thought, let's make things a little nicer for someone we can make things nicer for, we could have avoided the pandemic without even thinking of us. The Freak is saying disagree. Are you saying you disagree, or are you asking me to disagree, or telling me to disagree? I'm guessing you're meaning that you disagree, but with what? If you wouldn't mind. don't know if I'll get a reply on that right away, so don't want to just leave silence while I wait. But yeah, there are people out there, to get back on the issue of campaigning, there are people out there who think that we humans should stop killing animals of any kind. Now, usually when they say things like that, they usually have restrictions in mind that they don't even realize they have, or some of them realize and some don't. But just to give you an idea what I mean, there are people who are vegetarians because they don't want to harm animals, so they don't eat meat, but they eat fish. Fish are animals, and fish meat is still meat. It's not mammal meat. It's not reptile meat. It's not bird meat. It's fish meat. Um, and so there are still restrictions, and we have to do that because we humans have to eat. And again, most of us are not rich enough right now. I don't know if anybody is at this point, rich enough to do this, but most of us at least are not wealthy enough that we can produce all of our food without hurting any living things at all. So if we want to be nice to other living things, we've got to draw some lines somewhere and say, well, okay, we can't be nice by not eating any living things, because we wouldn't be able to eat and we'd die. And that's not being nice to ourselves. And other living things have to do that too. Lions, for example, um, can eat a very small amount of vegetation, and it's likely to give them some digestive trouble, but they can get a little bit of nutrient out of it, but not much. Their digestive tract is too short for that, and they, like us humans, don't have the ability to digest cellulose. So it takes more digestive tract to break that stuff down than a lion has, and they're more likely to get sick and die if they try to switch to a vegetarian diet than anything else. Now, granted, there might be a few lions out there who could survive on a mostly vegetation diet. If they switch to, say, half vegetation and half meat, there might be a tiny population of the lions out there that would survive that. And if they thought to do that, if it was something they wanted to do and they tried, those that survived it would pass on their genes to future generations, and they could evolve over a very, very long time. They could evolve more ability to do that, but they need the cooperation of the rest of the lion population, at least for the most part, in order to make that a population evolution thing going on. And lions don't tend to have conferences on how to plan for a better future, so not likely to happen. We humans can do things like that. We can have conferences on how to plan for a better future. We can make YouTube videos like this one on how to plan for a better future, how to campaign for the things you want, how to support campaigns for things that you want, whether financially or otherwise. And we should make use of these things that we can do. It just makes sense to make use of them, to make use of, for example, the human brains that at least most humans have. I say at least most because there is a such thing as being anencephalic. Those human beings generally don't survive much beyond birth, if they even make it to birth, because they literally have either no brain or next to no brain. There is also such a thing as microcephalosis, or microcephalic, which has very little brain, very little human brain, but still has a human brain. And there was actually a book written in 1964, the year I was born, named Teach Your Baby to Read. That one of the main subjects of the book was a study that was being done on microcephalics, babies born with next to no brains, or in some cases, just reduced substantially. They might have like 20, 25 or 20% as much brain tissue as your average person when they're born, maybe 10%. And usually, like a large cavity of cerebrospinal fluid in places where brain tissue was basically absent. And they they had some hypotheses, and they tested them out on these kids who would have otherwise just died in a very short period of time. They tried things out. Like, for example, somebody thought, well, what if being, inverted near near time for birth helps out with the brain development? What if, being head down, giving a little more blood pressure in the head, helps the brain grow? And so they hung these babies upside down, like, gently swung them with their heads down, to kind of mimic the being inverted inside of the womb while someone's walking. And that was one of many things that they did in their experimentation to try to find ways to basically save their lives. And they found they were able to save their lives. Not all of them, but a lot of them. They were able to save their lives. Not only that, but they found that um, through special training, through giving them instructions earlier on in life, teaching them earlier in life than most babies would get taught. Uh, Children who had less brains and therefore were less capable of learning earlier in life, um, and they taught them earlier than most kids would get taught. And they found that these babies would grow up to have above average intelligence after this special treatment. So, on the average, they were smarter than most people, even though they were born with a condition that basically amounted to having so little brains they weren't expected to live. So, yeah. So, like I said, we humans should make use of these human brains that most of us have, and that some of us have learned to care about using. And if somebody tells you to believe something, and you don't have any reason to believe it other than they said so, don't. That's my advice. Don't. I mean, you do what you think is best, but don't believe them. Don't disbelieve them until you have a reason to do one of those things. And by reason, I don't mean like, oh, it would be nice if they're right, therefore I'll believe them. That's not a reason. That's a reason to fool yourself. Maybe if you want to feel a little better about something and you think it would be nice to believe a thing, okay, if you like fooling yourself. But you can do better than that. Instead of believing something that it would be nice to believe because you can force yourself into it somehow, which a lot of us can't, literally can't. And those who can don't understand that. They seem to have a hard time with, why don't you just believe this? Well, because we can't. But instead of forcing yourself to believe something and then always having that doubt that you have to keep pushing back in your mind that says, well, I did kind of force myself to believe this, and sure, eventually that'll go away. I mean, if you force yourself to believe something as a very young child, by the time you're an adult, you probably don't even remember you did that anymore. A lot of religious indoctrination basically depends on that. They get you while you're young, and when you're older, you never question it. Why would you? It's it's so far back in your past, you don't even remember it happened. But But we can do better than that, because you can look into the thing you are being told to believe is true. And if it's something that it turns out is probably not true, maybe you can make it true, depending on what it is. Or maybe you can find something similar to it that you can make true. Take, for example, this idea of a heaven. Well, up in the sky, you know. Okay, so years ago, they said heaven was up in the sky. I think most people still say it's up, but up where? I mean, our planet rotates. Okay, flat earthers don't believe that. Um, they can catch up later. But for the rest of us, yeah, our planet rotates once every 24 hours. That's not spinning, by the way. Yes, I know the term spin is used to talk about planetary rotation. They call it planetary spin. I prefer to call it planetary rotation because the term is more precise. When you say planetary spin, you're using a specialized use of the word spin that only applies to planetary rotation. Any other time you use the word spin, it literally means a rapid rotation, and not very many planets do that. Um, Diesel shortage. What is this? Tammy says the diesel shortage. Then you learn we were at 25% production for 2 months already. Um, yeah, yeah. There's a lot going on with the fossil fuel stuff. That's some of it's intentionally deceptive. Um, some of it is, again, not so much intentionally deceptive as people saying what they think is true. People. Oh, Newsmax and Fox. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's just it. You got a whole bunch of people out there who believe the things that are said by things like by entities like Fox News. I mean, they have literally in court specified that they are not a news channel, and they shouldn't be held to the standards of a news channel. But they have news in their name, and to a lot of people, that's enough. Like the Democratic Party having Democratic in their name. Lately, they have at least been starting to say that they're in favor of democracy, but for quite a long time I hadn't even heard them do that. And I think the main reason they're doing that now is because the Republican Party has basically been trying to take democracy away. And um, at least most of the people working in our government who are Democratic Party members don't want to see that happen. Most of the people don't want to see it happen either. But a lot of people are helping make it happen without even realizing what they're doing. And that comes back to the topic that I started this video for, supporting campaigns. They are supporting someone else's campaign that includes some things that they think they like the idea of, things that they've heard said, and they're like, yeah, I want that, so I will support this campaign. But there are other things in that campaign that they may or may not know about, and they may or may not understand. But if they're supporting the campaign financially, they don't get to decide how that money gets spent. And they are inadvertently, if not intentionally, supporting those things like getting rid of our democracy. When people showed up at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., um, for what amounted collectively to the purpose of overthrowing the U.S. government, I'm sure a lot of the people that were there did not have that intention. A lot of them probably did not know about that intention. And a lot of them probably had heard about that intention and disbelieved it. Quite understandably so, because, it was being done by people they trusted. And why would people they trust do this terrible thing that they don't want done? That's, trying to straighten this out a little. I'm going to just do up this button here. There we go. But But there were also people there who at least partially knew what was going on, and there were people there who very much knew what was going on, and there were people there who very much knew what was going on and were largely calling the shots. That they were leading the other people to do things that a lot of the other people didn't realize they were doing. Now there comes a point where you have to realize something's going on. Like, when people are breaking windows to get into the place. I mean, it's one thing to knock over a fence that's, not like mounted in the ground. You're not damaging it or anything. It's one thing to knock over a fence. Now, I've seen that happen. I've been at a protest uh, much longer ago than that, where some of the people there knocked over one of these temporary fences that were put up. And the people that knocked over the fence, they weren't trying to damage the fence, but then other people walked over the fence, and the weight of the crowd on the fence, the fence got damaged. So damage happened. But I can kind of understand. Um, I stayed back, by the way, and I mean, that wasn't what I was there for. But I can understand why some people might think, okay, um, it's okay to walk on this fence now. It's already broken, and we're not doing anything wrong by getting a little closer to the building than they were allowing us to. It's a little civil disobedience. But when it comes to climbing in through broken windows and things like that, and people who physically assaulted police officers, and I mean, yeah, no, I just I have a hard time imagining that anybody who went that far was still under the deceptive idea that that they weren't trying to do anything like overthrow the government, because the rumors were all over the place, and there it was happening, and they were involved in it. That's when they should have done like I did when the fence went down, and just stand back. And some people did. Good on them. Uh, other people made mistakes, and other people did exactly what they came there to do.
Never heard that.
So, yeah, um, I don't know what more I should say on this subject, or if I should end this video. I've got two people in the chat. If either one wants to give me an opinion on that, or um, throw a question at me or something, that would be fine. If either one of you would like to join the chat, and join the live stream and be in it, let me know. I can post a link, and you can grab the link and come in here. And if I see you come in, I can add you to the stream. Tammy says, I have a hard time listening to anyone defending January 6th. Yeah. Cannot see the second person. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, the what I'm seeing on my screen here. Let's see. Maybe I can just present this. Let's see. How do I do this? Add. Let's see. I guess I'm gonna have to stop. Change one of them. Hold on. Okay. Screen share. And I'm just gonna go entire screen. I think that'll work. Oh, maybe it doesn't seem it wants to let me do that. Oh, there it is. Okay, so share the entire screen. So yeah, now you should be able to see this. Over on my right hand side, I've got this list. That's actually coming from the live chat on both channels. because this is simulcasting on the Eminent Reflection channel and the Donald Kronos channel. And so apparently one of you is on one channel and the other one is on the other channel. And so you wouldn't be seeing each other's chat there, or you wouldn't be seeing each other's chat there. I'm seeing both. And I suppose I could leave it up like that, so you can see each other. That chat in here, on my end, I believe also includes a private chat, that if someone joins the stream, that they can chat to each other in that private chat, and it'll show up for people who are looking at the stream, from the stream link, which, by the way, is this link up here. I'll just go ahead and post that since it's visible on there. If anybody wants to copy it, let's see if I can paste that in here and just send that there. I could have typed something saying what it is, but it's not going to be any use to anyone once this live stream is done anyway. But that is the StreamYard link to join through StreamYard. And if you open that in a web page, open that in a web browser tab, that will let you join the stream backstage. And if I see you backstage, I can then I can add you to the stream. If I don't happen to see that you're backstage, then obviously I can't do that. And I forget where it tells me, but there should be an indication somewhere if somebody's waiting backstage. But yeah, I guess the main thing I'm trying to get across is that there are things that are important to each of us. We each have our own things that we either already have made campaigns out of or could make campaigns out of. And I recommend doing that, and support your own campaign by doing things like contacting the government about it. Like, as Tammy said, write a letter to President Biden. He may or may not get the letter. Somebody else, somebody there will get it. Somebody will read it. And here's the thing: even if the president himself doesn't get to read a letter that was sent to the president, it is read by the office of the president, and it is something that is then therefore known at least to someone within the office of the president. And concerns that are raised to the office of the president are more likely to become known to the president eventually, if the right context comes up where somebody remembers and says, "Oh yeah, somebody had talked about that in a letter they sent," or if enough people send such letters, or enough people call into the White House comment line and leave a comment, or enough people talk to their senator or their congressional representative, and some of those senators or congressional representatives send a note to the office of the president or talk to the president about the subject. These are all things that we don't have, any direct control over, but we do have some control over them. We do have the ability to decide what efforts we make. And I have a bunch of signs up there, on a shelf, that I have. Every one of them I have at one time or another stood outside for long periods of time holding up a sign. They're signs that I made. And so a lot of people might not understand, why would I do that? Well, some people are not going to understand. Some people are going to look at the sign and read it and not understand what it means. Some people are going to look at it and read it and understand what it means and disagree with it. And some people are going to look at it and read it and understand it and know what it means and agree with it. And if they leave it there, if they just leave it there, I've made some progress. But if they then turn around and they make their own sign and they show other people their sign, um, maybe sometime I should do a live stream showing those signs. I don't know, but I could. Um, I do believe I've actually done a live stream like that somewhere along the way where I showed at least some of the signs that I've made. But yeah, if they decide they like what I'm saying and they make their own signs and they go out and they spend an hour outside holding up a sign that they made for other people to see it, just maybe one more person will do that as well. There's no guarantee. You know, if I if I got lucky and two people decided to start doing what I was doing, well, one of those might also get two people to start doing what they were doing. And I do know that I have influenced people um, to copy that idea, that, be out there holding up a sign because I've had people that I've ran into holding up political signs who told me that they got the idea by seeing me doing it. And they decided if I could do it, they could do it. Um, Tammy says, you never know the spark you could ignite in someone else by standing there with your signs. Well, yeah, you never know until they tell you that's why they're standing out there holding a sign. And like I said, I have had that happen. I've also had people tell me who I didn't see standing out holding a sign, tell me that they have done a lot of it and they did it because they saw me doing it and they realized if I can do that all by myself without a crowd standing around me, so can they. One of the things I pushed for quite a while, and I haven't pushed much for it since then, since the pandemic started. But it's funny that I still pushed it a little bit, but pushed long before the pandemic started, which would have made perfect sense to be doing when the pandemic started. And I tried, and I couldn't get anybody to hear me out because I was mostly self isolating through a lot of the pandemic, through some of the worst parts of it. But the idea of a distributed rally, I mean, imagine, take one of these rallies that we've had where people come out, say, for example, on Spring Street in Los Angeles, and you got 1,500 people walking on Spring Street in Los Angeles on the street, not on the sidewalk, maybe a few on the sidewalks, but mostly on the streets. And they're holding their signs and they're chanting, and somebody's got a megaphone and they're telling the other people what to chant. And, for example, they might be yelling something like, um, uh, no justice, no peace. Well, me, I'd rather say justice, peace, because why take the no? But I get it. I get it. It's a simple thing, and but the thing is, when you're doing it on your own, you can do it your way. It doesn't have to be almost your way. It can be your way. And if you took that same 1,500 people and you said, okay, on such and such a date, now it doesn't have to be all on the same date either, but just, to show what could be done. If you said on such and such a date, like, for example, if I were to say, okay, my birthday is on May 27th, that's a pretty long time from now. There's time for that. What if I said, anybody who wants to help me help others learn to do their own campaigning, use my birthday for that, May 27th. It's sometimes another holiday lands on the same day, but that's okay. They can use that holiday, or they can not use a holiday at all and just say it's a date, May 27th. Okay. And it doesn't have to be that date either, but just as an example, if we were to say, okay, Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, let's see if we can get 1,000 people on Wilshire Boulevard, not in a crowd, not holding up all signs for the same thing, but holding up signs for something that they care about and that they either know other people care about as well or hope other people care about as well. And get them all the way from Los Angeles to Santa Monica, everywhere on that street, spread out. I don't know how many people that would be per block on the average, but I think it would be enough that people would notice each other. They wouldn't feel like they're in a big crowd. And you know what? They could socially distance well enough to not have any big worries about catching or passing on a virus. So there's that. Like I said, perfect for during a pandemic. But yeah, that could be done. And some people could just you know pull out a chair and sit in one place. They park their car somewhere and pull out a chair and sit in one place. Um, if they don't want their car to be in the way of the view of other people holding signs or themselves holding a sign, park it around the corner. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's parking on much, if any, of Wilshire Boulevard anyway. So yeah, park the car somewhere out of the way if they've got a car, and pull a chair up and sit down, or take public transit. Just pick a stop somewhere, get off, hold your sign. Other people could walk back and forth on one block. Some people might, cross the street and walk on the other side, and cross the street and walk back on the other side. Again, follow the traffic signs, obey the traffic laws, don't get in anybody's way, don't block traffic, don't be an a-hole about it and go, hey, you got to see me, you got to see me. No, just be there to be seen by those people who see you. That is something that we need to learn to do. That's a way that you can support your own campaign, and you can support the campaigns of other people. You can support free speech in general by saying, you know what, you don't have to agree with me to be out on the same day as I am, on the same street as I am, advocating for what you think should be advocated for. I'll support that. I'll support your free speech. The same as I will support your right to vote for someone that I'm not voting for in the same election. You don't have to vote for who I vote for. That's why I'm an independent, because I recognize that I shouldn't have to vote for a particular candidate just because a political party told me to, or a certain person told me to, or a group of people told me to. Now, I do understand the power in the collective vote, but I also understand the deception of the collective vote. I mean, if you've got one person who's a member of a party who thinks to themselves, well, the party picked this candidate, so I should vote for this candidate because I mean, okay, there's the question of can anybody else win, but throwing that aside, if they think to themselves, um, all these other people must have wanted this candidate, therefore I should support them by voting for this candidate. Um, One thing that's hard to know for sure is, did that candidate really have as much support as it seemed the candidate had? Or were there more people out there thinking that same way? Thinking, I'll support this candidate because it seems all these other people want this candidate, than there were people actually supporting the candidate. Is it possible that maybe nobody was supporting that candidate except a few rich people with enough money to make it look like everybody else was supporting them? Mm, well, it says, Tammy says, that guy in, I think, New York has become famous for just putting random statements on cardboard signs. um, I wonder what the random statements are. I don't think I've heard of that famous guy. And that's the thing about fame. You can be famous to different degrees, and somebody can be extremely famous, and there are still people out there who haven't heard of them. Um, I mean, literally name any famous person and they fit that description. There are people who haven't heard of them, guaranteed. Um, there are a lot of there are a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, random things. And I don't know what exactly is meant in that context by random statements. But think about it: if somebody can be noticed putting random statements on a sign, couldn't you be noticed putting up some statement of something that you care about? I mean, a statement like, um, A statement like, say, you know, hold up a sign about something you care about. That's a statement, and it may be a bit meta, not meaning the Facebook kind, but in the word sense. Uh, but we can do that, and we can support other people's campaigns by encouraging free speech and encouraging democracy, because those things themselves support the campaigns of the people. And that's a point I don't know how to emphasize strongly enough, that we have way more people than we have politicians. And in a democracy, every one of us has a political responsibility to that democracy, a political responsibility of all things to share and express and encourage our own point of view. Doesn't mean that we're going to get other people to agree with us, but that's what a democracy is all about. Share our views and listen to the views of others. We don't have to like their views, but we should listen. We should hear them out. And we should learn to scrutinize the views of other people and to scrutinize our own views and to listen when someone else scrutinizes our own views, and see how much of a point they really have. How much are they just trying to speak against something that they maybe don't understand, or that doesn't go along with um, doesn't go along with the um, things that a person wants to say. Sorry, I got distracted by, oh, here it is again, spam. Hold on. I am not going to put up with the spam right now. That's not free speech. That's somebody abusing the ability to post something. So no, not going to allow that. Um, and there we are. Free speech has limitations. Um, recognize that, accept that. The same as people that want to say, oh, the Second Amendment right means they can carry guns around all they feel like it. No, it doesn't. Um, there are places that allow carrying a gun around as long as you keep it in sight. There are places that allow it even if you conceal it. There are other places where doing either without a license is illegal. And uh, if you happen to be somewhere where it's private property or where a special permit is required, there's that restriction as well. So you can't just say, oh, Second Amendment, therefore I can do this. As a matter of fact, the Second Amendment doesn't mean what most people who flaunt it seem to think it means. It was about militias um, that would be government controlled. In other words, that private entities could put together groups of people to be ready to be on call if the military needed some assistance. That the government could then say, okay, we know your group is ready for this and we need the extra help, so come on in and help. We're ready for that. Not to just uh, not to do things like go against the military, or to attack government buildings, like some of them tried to do on the now infamous January 6th. um, Infamous to the point where we don't even have to say what year it was in anymore. But yeah, we need to have limitations on such things. um, because I mean, for example, if you're trying to communicate, if you're trying to get a message across, and you organize a gathering, um, you give people invitations to come to your gathering, and then somebody comes in and they just shout over the top of you so you can't be heard. That's not free speech. That is denying your free speech. If they want to yell the things that they want to yell, they can do it when they're not yelling over the top of you in an organized event that you put together. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying no. This is not the time. You know, but I don't. I'm not the arbiter of such things. I don't make the decision. What's acceptable and what's not, and what's right and what's wrong to the country or to everyone or anything like that. I decide what's acceptable to me. I decide what I like, what I dislike, and other people can do the same thing. If I like something that the Republican Party is supporting, I'm allowed to support that. If I like something that the Democratic Party is supporting, I'm allowed to support that. If I like something that the Green Party is supporting, I'm allowed to support that. I can do that because I want to. And if somebody's a member of one of those parties, they still have the right to support the things that they want from any of those parties or any other party or any individual. Now, if you've got some contractual obligation that says that you have to support some whatever is on the party platform, well, then you've got a contractual obligation you have to honor. Um, some politicians might put themselves in such a position where they're not allowed to go against a political party's platform. That is something I think should be illegal. I don't think it currently is, but I think it should be illegal. There are certain kinds of corruption that are currently legal that, again, I think should not be. Um, but when there are things that are being done by a powerful political party that maybe has contractually obligated politicians who ran for their nomination um, to uphold those things, then how do we get our government to fix them? And I think the answer is that in that case we would have to get some people elected who are not under such contractual obligations. And again, I don't know to what extent such things are out there. Um, I'm just saying, if something like that is getting in the way, we need to work around it. A big thing I've been pushing for lately is get rid of the restriction that says vote for only one, you know, or vote for only up to so many candidates. If you've got a ballot for an election that has one seat available or two seats available, and you're being told you can't vote for more candidates than there are seats available for that office, the question that comes to my mind is why? Why are you not allowed to vote in favor of every candidate that you are in favor of? um, I suspect they are. Yes. Tammy's asking, do I suspect that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Carrie Lake are under such contracts? Um, because they're being pretty awful. And yeah, I suspect they are under such contracts. I don't know for sure how the Republican Party handles that sort of thing and what exactly in the Republican Party's platform. I'm not sure of right now either. I know that that former president, um, who I'd rather not mention by name, even though I share a first name in common with him, which he's sort of turned into a swear word, um, has a lot of influence over the Republican Party. And I know it appears that a lot of Republican politicians are holding to verbal contracts that aren't necessarily written contracts, where they have an agreement with other Republicans or with people in the Republican Party leadership and or with, say, for example, a former president who was nominated by the Republican Party and who has a lot of influence in the Republican Party, that they I think a lot of them have made agreements to do certain things. and that those agreements are likely not in writing, and likely, I would say, likely intentionally not in writing. In other words, that they've avoided putting them in writing to avoid any um, consequences, to avoid having any evidence out there that they have conspired to do these things as a group. And yeah, conspiracies are real, by the way. News for those who think conspiracies are only things you ever hear about in conspiracy theories, which, by the way, that term in and of itself is a bit deceptive, because a scientific theory, the theories that most of us hear about out other than conspiracy theories, a scientific theory is like uh, that's a very stringent thing in the field of science. That it's a hypothesis that has been tested and retested and retested, and it's been tested by a bunch of different people and in a bunch of different ways. And no matter how much testing they do, it still holds up and seems to repeatedly be verified that it's true. Um, that's what theory means to a scientist, and they don't, when they're speaking to other scientists, they don't have to say scientific theory. They can just say theory, and it's taken to mean scientific theory. And they understand that to mean that they're talking about something that has been well tested and seems very much to be verified as fact, and that people have done pretty much everything they can to try to show that it's not fact, and it still shows up as fact. And other people have done everything they can to show that it is fact, and that works. It does show that it does seem to be fact. So, approached from both angles of trying to support it and trying to knock it down, it still shows up as fact. In the field of science, that's a scientific theory. A conspiracy theory, really, under science, wouldn't even make it as a hypothesis in most cases. But they're basically people's more or less hypotheses, ideas of maybe this conspiracy is happening, maybe people are conspiring to do this or that or whatever. And there's usually at least a little truth in them, I think. Um, and it seems to me, and this is a conjecture on my part to an extent, but it seems to me that one of the things that happens is when somebody comes up with a hypothesis about a conspiracy that actually is happening out there, that there's a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of effort being put into by people who have a lot of wealth and power, and they find out that somebody has more or less hit the nail on the head. Um, I think sometimes they will feed information back in that direction, um, to give such people the impression that they're being verified, that yes, they're absolutely right about the things they thought, and there's more, and here's the stuff that's more. And they give them stuff that, at first they give them stuff that's believable. And again, this is something I have no way of verifying, but I've made observations. This seems to be happening at least some of the time. That that such people get fed information that at first um, goes along with both reality and with their hypothesis, and later on they get fed stuff that goes along with their hypothesis but not reality, until eventually they've got so many ridiculous things mixed in that that most people who hadn't already believed their earlier hypothesis would never believe this new compound version of it that has all this ridiculous stuff thrown in. And I think that, well, I am reasonably certain that at least some amount of that goes on to keep most people from realizing there's even such a thing as a real conspiracy. That conspiracies actually do happen, that people do conspire to do things together. And by the way, not every conspiracy is illegal. For example, if you get a group together to go out and protest or to go out and advocate for a particular change, that is a conspiracy by definition. Um, I think it generally wouldn't get you called a conspiracy in court. I'm not a lawyer, but this is just what I know of legal usage. My limited knowledge of the subject, um, simply because um, often it seems that often in court the term conspiracy gets used to mean illegal conspiracy, in the same way that between scientists the term theory gets used to mean scientific theory, or in biology the term evolution gets used to mean biological evolution. That a lot of times these shortcuts get made. And there are even some dictionary definitions of conspiracy that include it being illegal as part of the definition, but not all definitions include that factor, and that is a subset of conspiracies, of what a conspiracy is. That it's not it's not a separate meaning; it's a subset of a meaning. That some conspiracies are illegal. Those that are illegal conspiracies, and um, there are also the subset of conspiracy to commit a crime, which in itself is an illegal conspiracy. So, yeah, but conspiracies do happen. They're a common thing. They are how most big things get done. For example, getting a human being to walk on the moon. You can't do that by yourself. At least not under our modern technology. Um, there has been a conspiracy to do that, an actual conspiracy to actually do that. Now we have a conspiracy theory that that actual conspiracy never happened, and that according to the conspiracy theory, um, uh, millions of people are involved in trying to fool the rest of the world into thinking it happened or something to that effect. And yeah, um, so there's nonsense and then there's sense. And again, it's up to each one of us to decide which, what stuff we think falls under which category. But there are things we can do to prepare ourselves to better make such assessments. We can study epistemology, for example. We can study logic and um, learn to uh, look for logical fallacies, and to tell the difference between something that just resembles a logical fallacy and something that actually is a logical fallacy. And and if you look into something like that and you like it and you want to encourage logic, um, you can make that your own campaign. You can go outside holding up a sign that says logic. That's easy to see from a distance. Or if you want one that people need to be a little closer to read, maybe logic is good, or I like logic. Uh, you know, to encourage other people. Maybe a sign that says study logic. It's good for you. Again, few more words. Can't read it from quite as far away. But if you've got enough money that you can afford to buy some uh, poster board and some markers, and you know work on your sign making ability, um, or maybe have something printed, um, by some place that prints stuff like that. There are several such places, and you might even be able to get somebody to lay it up for you if you don't have the software or the skills to do that. But there's free software out there, so I mean, if you don't have software that can do it, you can buy something. GIMP, GIMP. It stands for graphics image manipulation um, program. I think it was. Um, that's one that's free. There are lots of others. There's if you want to get office tools for free, there's LibreOffice. Um, you can use stuff like that to support your campaign. And but yeah, experiment,
Okay, why they go black?
because what will work in your area may be different than what works somewhere else, and what will work in a certain situation may be different than what works in some other situation. I have done such experiments, and I found that, for example, if you've got tourists coming to the White House, to gawk at the White House and wave at the president who isn't looking at them, and whatever else they want to do there, um, they're likely to stand there and talk with each other for a while, and casually look around. And if you've got a sign with a lot of words on it, some of them will stop and read the whole thing because they can, and you become part of the tourist attraction. If, on the other hand, you're somewhere where uh, people are in a hurry and they don't have much time to stop and talk or read a long sign, if you can get something down to a few words they can read at a glance on their way by, if they've got a moment, they might stop and ask you a question about it. So kind of, try to be ready for that. Um, Tammy says, my dad didn't believe people funded Bernie Sanders until we were having a very heated discussion one day, and I informed him people like me were donating to Bernie. I think he softened and listened more after that. Yeah, because when you're talking about the kind of money it takes to run a political campaign here in the USA, especially for a presidential campaign, how much money that takes, it is hard for a lot of people to imagine that you can do that. Um, with donations of $1, $7, uh, $27, um, $13, maybe $36. That these contributions, these monetary contributions that people who don't have much money can uh, occasionally make, or can scrounge and make, or whatever they need to do. Yeah, they do add up if you got enough people doing it, but it takes a lot of support from the people that way. And that's why I was saying earlier, if you want to support a campaign financially, do that. But keep in mind, unless you're the richest person on the planet, somebody can outbid you. Somebody can put in more money into a campaign than you can. But what they might not be able to do is get as many people as you can on their side. They might be able to do way more because they've got money. They can spend it to try to get people on their side. But if they've got to convince people of something that isn't true, or if they've got to convince people to support something that's bad for those people, they're going to have a lot harder time doing that, even with the money behind them, than somebody would have if they're trying to convince the people of something that's really good for them, actually good for them, that they don't need much convincing, because if they bother to look at it at all, it's obviously true. You can get a lot of people on your side that way. And yeah, Bernie Sanders got a lot of people on his side because he was actually advocating for stuff that a lot of people wanted. Now, was it all perfect? No. Was everything that he was pushing for something that everybody supporting him wanted? No. But it was enough. And he listened to the people. I mean, take his "not me, us" slogan. Um, I gave that to his campaign. Suggested that it should have a capital U and a capital S in the word "us" to have a second meaning of United States. And in some of the stuff that it's come out in, you can see that, very large capital U, capital S, capital U, capital S. In other cases, it's a lowercase us, and it's just small words like the rest of it. Um, so it's not all the same. And there again, I think that's because a lot of different people made their own artwork with such things, and that's their contribution. And that's what I mean. I contributed ideas. I did contribute some money, not much, can't afford much, but I contributed ideas. I contributed uh, what work I could put into it. I, contributed making some signs and holding signs up, and those are contributions as well. Not every contribution is monetary, and what's more, those non-monetary contributions can help to convince people who have some money they can contribute that this thing is worth it. Oh, you're very welcome, Tammy. Um, yeah, I've done a lot of little things like that over the years. I mean, it doesn't mean that I'll ever get, I mean, heck, I was like within 20, maybe 25 feet of Bernie Sanders not long ago. And I so wanted to talk to him about electoral reform, something I've wanted to talk to him about since before the first time I ever did get to talk with him. That was actually uh, long time ago on the Brunch with Bernie segment of Tom Hartman Radio, and I asked if he would support the right to vote directly against someone, and the call got disconnected before he responded, and he responded by saying something to the effect of, "Well, in some states we already do have a none of the above option," which is not at all what I was talking about, and I had no way to tell him that wasn't what I was talking about. But yeah, right now I just really like to get rid of that, vote for only one restriction. That's so much easier, and I think I could get him to understand that if I could just have a 2 minute conversation with him. But yeah, there I was, so close, and he was talking to two other people, and um, I was guarding a gate at his rally, and well, the rally he was having with um, uh, candidate for mayor here in Los Angeles, Karen Bass, and yeah, that's a close race. I don't know how that's going to turn out. We shall see. But oh, long time ago, I did some stuff to help the Obama campaign that I don't think most people would ever believe. I really honestly believe the campaign wouldn't have happened, at least when it did, if not for my efforts. I have very strong reason to believe that's the case. But a lot of work I put into that. And but at one point in time during the campaigning, I sent a letter to his wife, which apparently reached her, um, explaining how the Spanish language is a lot more phonetic than English, and that I had been told that he didn't speak any Spanish at all. I don't know whether that was accurate or not, but in this letter, I explained that it's my understanding that he doesn't speak Spanish, but because of the nature of the phonetics of the language, it should be very easy to teach him most of the phonetics in a short time, and get it to the point where he can read something written in Spanish and it can be intelligible to someone who understands Spanish. And he wouldn't necessarily even have to understand what he's reading himself, as long as he can read it to a translator who understands Spanish and English and can translate it back to him in English. And if he's satisfied with the way it comes back in English, that's good enough. He could use that. And so for Puerto Rico, um, I wrote a little sample thing saying, what is it? Um, Nací en una isla y yo sé que la comida, la gasolina y todo cuesta más. I forget how the whole thing goes, but basically, I was born on an island, and I understand that the food, the gasoline, and everything costs more because things have to be shipped overseas to reach a place like that. Not everything is going to be produced there, and shipping something across the ocean is expensive. And so, because I had lived on an island myself for a period of my life, um, I understood these things. And specifically, I lived on one of the Hawaiian islands, and he was born on a Hawaiian island. So, I figured this is something I can count on. He understands, and so I wrote that speech as a sample. And I think I wrote in the letter, they could use it if they wanted, or have somebody write a different one. I didn't expect it would get used. It did. It got used. It ended up on the radio, and the only thing that he pronounced somewhat poorly was the word todo, Todo, which means all, like as in todo cuesta más. He pronounced it like dodo, which is a little harder D. The soft D, the sounds like the English TH in Spanish. That's recognized as a D sound. It's what's called the fricative D. Um, the D sound is much closer to the Spanish trilled R sound, and so it sounded kind of like he was saying toro, 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 todo cuesta más. But minor error. Any fluent Spanish speaker would understand what he meant. And that's the thing. The more fluent a person is in the language, the less the person speaking to them has to be speaking very clearly for them to understand. As a matter of fact, fluent native speakers of a language very often speak very unclearly to each other and think nothing of it, um, because they can, and they'll both understand each other, and it just becomes habitual sloppiness. But and even to the point where that habitual sloppiness occasionally is all someone hears growing up, and they don't realize that there's a less sloppy way to speak the language, and that becomes their idea of speaking it clearly. This is part of how languages evolve. But yeah. But there again, like I said, I sent that in. It got used. Um, Bit of a shock to me, which is funny because I've given ideas away my whole life, and a lot of them have gotten used. I've given them away, into politicians, to corporations, to basically anybody I thought could make use of them, and some of them have made a lot of money for the entities that I've sent them to. I never asked for anything in return, and I never expected anything in return. Never got anything in return other than being able to see, hey, look, there's this thing in the world that I helped make happen, and that's kind of cool. And I wish everybody could get to feel that. I mean, that's not why I do it, but I think it's cool. I think it's a really nice feeling to be able to look at things in the world around you, and think to yourself, well, that probably wouldn't exist yet, or maybe never would have existed at all, if I hadn't given something freely of myself to society to make that happen. Now, I am a big advocate for some sort of universal income, and that's part of why. Because I've been poor my whole life, and I've given of myself as much as I can, but I can't afford to give more of myself because I'm poor, and I've been poor my whole life. I'm still poor now, and I think I have more now than I've ever had before, and I'm still poor. Um, but yeah, you're right, Tammy. I do have every right to be proud of that. However, most people won't believe me if I tell them about it, and and at this point, I don't even remember a lot of it. There's a lot of the stuff I've given away that it's been so long, and there have been so many things that I'm not even sure myself anymore in a lot of cases. Um, there are a few of them that I've mentioned to people from time to time, and so they stick in my head because I've kept them fresh. Like for example, the Auric XL hypoallergenic vacuum cleaner. Now, the Auric XL vacuum cleaner, that wasn't my idea. All I added to it was the hypoallergenic. And the phone person that I talked to, the phone receptionist that I talked to, they were sure they weren't going to be able to get anyone to listen to them. They're just a phone receptionist. Who's going to listen to them? And but I told them, that I've given away a lot of ideas before, and I said, the way to handle it, the best way to handle it, is to take the idea and bring it to their supervisor or their manager, someone above them, directly above them, and if they feel it's worth bringing to that person, and if they do bring it to that person, to tell them the same thing, that if they feel it's worth bringing to someone above them, to please pass it on. Just tell them, they thought this was worth bringing to their attention. If they feel it's worth bringing to someone else's attention above them, to pass it up the chain. And a lot of ideas I've given away have gotten done that way. Now, there is no chain of custody in most cases that way. In some cases, somebody does get credit somewhere along the way for, this idea came from this person, and and that's as far back as anybody knows. And this happens with a lot of things in our society, that um, one person gets famous for things that were done by a bunch of people. I mean, take for example, Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. A lot of people think he did. Um, there's no formal claim that he invented the light bulb, but there is a sort of formal claim that he improved the filament that was being used, that he came up with a better filament for the light bulb. But that's not really quite true either. And again, that's only sort of a formal claim because it is reasonably well known. He owned an invention factory. He assigned other people to try out different filaments. They tried all kinds of things, and most of them were not as good as what was already in use. Um, but he did manage to make, I say he, again, I'm giving him the credit. I mean, he organized it, so, we can do that. But they, his people, did come up with something that was enough better that it was marketable, and that they had an incandescent light that lasted longer than other incandescent lights had lasted, and that was enough. Now, who invented the original incandescent light? I think there's a record of that somewhere. I don't know who it is. Maybe the knowledge is up there and I don't recall right now. But does it matter? I mean, we got them and we used them for a long time, and then somewhere along the way, people figured out that fluorescent lighting could be done more efficiently, and so that started to replace a lot of incandescent lighting. And then we got halogen lighting, and I might have the order slightly out there, but halogen, which basically combines the incandescent with the fluorescent, and then we got LED lighting, light emitting diodes, and so all of these innovations. And how many people worked on these things? Who worked on these things? Do we really need to know? The important thing is we've got them. And this goes back to what I never finished saying earlier. People talk about this heaven, an afterlife that maybe we'll get to someday, if we do the right things or believe the right things or whatever. And there's thousands of different um, specific descriptions of how a person is supposed to get there, and what requirements there are, and what they need to do and what they need to not do, and all this other stuff, and nobody really knows. I mean, unless there is such a place and someone's actually there, but they're not coming down and telling us. I mean, if the place exists, why don't somebody there build a camera and broadcast and put it on our internet, let us hear it straight from the top. um, but what is that world like? I mean, you hear people say, oh, well, people will be sitting on the right hand side of the Father in a throne for all of eternity. Well, that sounds boring. Okay, skip the word I was going to use there. But But if what we want is a better world, if we want a paradise to live in, we can build that here on Earth. And what's more, we don't have to build it just here on Earth. We can build it in outer space. And I don't mean on another planet. I don't mean like terraform Mars to be a paradise planet. Um, yeah, we maybe could do that. There might be stuff living there already. I mean, hiding deep under the soil. Maybe there's stuff we could still learn from some of that. Maybe we shouldn't mess too much with that until we better understand it. But right now, we already have the ability to build our own habitats, and we already know how to process minerals, process chemicals, to do a lot of things to make stuff out of other things that we find. And we yeah, really expensive thing to do, but there are people out there with the resources. There are governments with the resources. We could do a little asteroid mining and try to see, can we build a space station from stuff we can mine from asteroids? If we can build one space station, or one spaceship for that matter, if we can send a spaceship out into space, and with the help of robots or whatever it takes, build one more out there in outer space, that one doesn't have to get off the planet. It's already out there. And then we got twice as many of them to repeat the process with if we want to. So if we use each of those to build one more, if we've got the tools on that spaceship to build one more that also has the tools, well, then those two of them could build one more each, and then we've got four of them. And those four of them could build one more each, and then we've got eight of them. And those eight could build one more each, and we've got 16 of them. And sure, sooner or later, we're going to start running low on supplies from whatever asteroid we were mining to make this stuff. But there's more asteroids out there. Now, how would we power these things? Well, solar power, for starters. Could we make fuel out of some of the stuff we find from the asteroids? Yeah, probably. Again, this is stuff we don't know yet. But, I mean, consider this. And I don't know, anybody watching this now or watching in the future, I don't know if they have any religious beliefs or not. Not important to me. But for those people who do have religious beliefs, or those who want to entertain the idea of, could religious beliefs be true? By the way, I don't have. But for people who want to entertain that idea, because I have entertained the idea myself, thought about it, and carefully looked into it, and this is why I don't have any religious beliefs, because none of them held up to scrutiny. But if you think about, if there was a God out there, if there was, someone out there, if we're, not going to use the whole, tyrant God who threatens to send you to a bad place and stuff like that, but just to go with the good one who wants good stuff, because that's what most people who believe in a God believe in anyway, or at least want to believe in. And if they convince themselves to believe in something they want to believe in, then they're probably believing that. So consider that. If that God had built a perfect world out there for people to live in the afterlife, heaven, some call it, Valhalla, if you wish, or whatever. But why would that being let any of us in there when we're still screwing up the world we live on, the planet we live on now? We're still screwing up the world we live in. Why would such a being let any of us into that perfect world if there was one? I mean, I'm not saying that we should build heaven on earth or paradise on earth so that we can get into heaven in an afterlife. But if someone believes in an afterlife and they really want to get there, I will go as far as to suggest that it doesn't seem to me that it would make any sense that you could get in there any other way. At the very least, make your own best effort to keep this world from at least getting any worse than it is. Maybe making it a little better than it is, because you can. And since things do degrade, it only makes sense if you want something to not get worse that you need to make at least part of it better. You need to improve some stuff because other stuff is going to do the opposite of improving. And Tammy says, I consider myself part of the upper crust of the lower middle class. I'm not sure exactly what part is the crust. I think that's meant as sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but yeah, you know, we categorize ourselves. Other people categorize us, and the categories that other people put us in don't necessarily overlap with the ones we put ourselves in. But I think much more important than what categories we find ourselves in or put ourselves in or get placed in by other people is what individual things we choose to do, what individual things we choose to support, and what collective efforts we choose to be a part of. And to the extent that any of us can pull this off, what collective efforts we can manage to start and we choose to start. If you see something out there that requires more than just yourself to get done, and you don't see anybody else doing it, but you think it should be being done by a bunch of people, start. If you can, if you can spare the time and whatever resources necessary to just start. I have writings that I'd like to publish someday. I don't expect I'm ever going to publish them. I've even uh, sent money to a publisher and never. I mean, I sent them a manuscript, and the person that I sent the manuscript to got left the company, and um, I never sent a completed manuscript. I might do that someday. I might not, but I at least started. And if I die someday and somebody finds my incompleted manuscript, it might get published anyway, um, incomplete as it is. But at least I started. And same thing with this video. This has been going for almost 2 hours now. Now, I was hesitant to start it. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say. I had some ideas what I was going to say. I didn't know exactly. And here I am, almost 2 hours into the video, which wouldn't exist at all if I hadn't started it. So I hope someone finds it helpful. I hope there is some value in it that can be mined out of it, like finding gold in an asteroid. And if not, well, I tried, and I will try again. I've tried in the past, I'm trying now, and I will continue to repeatedly try, and to the extent I can, to continuously try, because it seems the right thing to do. And yeah, like I said, I don't believe in any kind of an afterlife. Um, but then again, if there is one, maybe whoever or whatever was in control of that figured I didn't need to believe in it, and that other people might be better off if I didn't. I don't know. I think it's more likely that there just isn't any such thing, and these are just stories people have told themselves and told each other until they collectively end up believing they're true. And in and of itself, I don't see anything directly wrong with that. But I mean, it maybe gives them a little comfort or something. That's worth a bit of cost. But dealing with the truth, dealing with reality, is more likely to give us better results in the short term and in the long run. So, to the extent that we can deal with truth and reality. And by truth, by the way, I don't mean naming something a truth and posting it on a network that's been named truth because, you know, because you can change the name of a word by, you can change the meaning of a word by making it the name for something. No, I don't mean something like that. You know, when I tweet something on Twitter, I'm not making a bird sound. That word tweet has a different meaning to it. And when somebody posts a truth on a truth network, um, and it's obviously false, that's why I'm putting air quotes around truth. You know, truth in air quotes. And we need a better way to do that. We need a distinction, in my opinion. We need a distinction between something named truth and something that fits the description or the definition of what truth is. Um, yeah. Uh, you know, I have no problem with the word tweet being used to describe a post on Twitter, because um, nobody's going to mistake that for being, you know, indicating that I'm making a bird sound when I post a tweet. I mean, unless it's actually a tweet that is just audio and there's actually a bird sound in it, in which case it wouldn't be a mistake. But nobody's going to mistake that for being something it's not because of the name. I do have a problem with, you know, naming a post on a social network a truth, and then using that to spread all kinds of falsities, all kinds of lies, intentional deceit, um, labeled as truths. No, no, they're not true, and I do have a problem with that name. Can I stop it? No, probably not. Can I protest to it? Absolutely. Can I point it out that it's deceptive? Sure, I can. And I hope other people will as well, because people need to see that, you know, they've been deceived. I mean, when you know, for example, when somebody decides whether they want to be on the political left or the political right, and they think Pinocchio ratings, yeah, uh, yeah, truth should be followed by Pinocchio ratings. Truths should be followed by Pinocchio ratings. Yeah, and but the thing is, if you know, they're in an echo chamber. You know, when they get into that platform, they're in an echo chamber with people who believe whatever they're told because, you know, because it's being posted as a truth. Therefore, it must be true, and it's you know, and it was put out there by somebody who they believe on faith rather than on earned trust or deserved trust. You know, faith meaning if it doesn't seem to be true, just convince yourself that it's true. And you know, like I was starting to say, people that, you know, try that want to decide between should they be more on the political left or the political right. If they conflate the word right with the word, you know, if they conflate the word right meaning the opposite of the left side or the opposite of toward the left side, if they conflate that with the meaning of the word right spelled the same way but meaning correct, well then, you know, they might well think that, you know, they should be on the right side so they're not on the wrong side. But that's a different thing. That's, you know, two different meanings of one word, and we get that a lot in the English language, so watch out for it. Learn to recognize it, and you know, learn to recognize conflation for what it is. Again, these are tools that we can use to, you know, to know what a conflation is and be able to recognize it and go, okay, so this is not right in the sense of being the opposite of wrong. It's right in the sense of being the opposite of left. And what does that even mean? Because it's obviously not really on the physical, spatial right hand side. It's on the so-called political right-hand side, as opposed to the so-called political left-hand side. And where are the vast majority of the people? Are they on the left, the right, and everywhere in between? Or are they maybe, on the average, somewhere way behind that or way ahead of that and not to the left or right of it at all? And what does any of that even mean? These aren't things I have the answers to, but they're questions that I think are worth asking ourselves and asking other people. You know, do you really want to be on the left or the right? Or do you want to be on the leading edge? That's what progressive is. That's the leading edge. And what's on the right? Well, we generally call that conservative. Conservative meaning basically holding on to something, holding on to what is. But that's not usually what they're doing, is it? It's more regressive. The opposite of progressive is regressive. Not the leading edge, not pushing toward the better world that we could make for ourselves and for everyone else, but trying to hold on to the past because in the past they were doing really well, and as things change, they run the risk that one of those changes might make it so that they're not doing better than everyone else anymore. So they fight against those changes. They fight against change. That's why they call it conservative. Now, there is another meaning of conservative as well. And so, to not conflate, I will say that there is conservative in the sense of conserving. And that when people talk about conservative versus liberal, well, what do they generally mean by that? Well, there's another conflation that goes on between two different words that don't sound alike and aren't spelled the same, and that is liberal and progressive, because a lot of people conflate those as if they're the same thing. Now, when you're talking fiscally liberal, meaning let's do a lot of spending, that is um, in stark contrast to fiscally conservative, meaning let's hold on to the money and not do a lot of spending. But you have to have the money to hold on to the money. So those people who think they're being fiscally conservative, who don't have money, are not really being fiscally conservative. They're helping the rich people to be fiscally conservative. They're helping people who have money to hold on to their money. And a lot of those people buy lottery tickets in the hopes that they'll get a pile of money someday. How is that conservative? They're not helping the rich people hold on to their money. They're not helping the government hold on to their money by, by trying to get all the money from them. That's not conservative. That's personally progressive. That's aiming for their own personal progress, and it's doing it in a really bad way, because if lotteries weren't profitable, they wouldn't exist. They exist to make money. They exist to take in more money than they give out. So when somebody spends money on a lottery ticket, odds are they're going to end up behind where they were. And if they spend more money on more lottery tickets, again, the odds are they're going to end up farther behind financially than they were. They are being financially regressive, not conservative, not progressive. They're being financially regressive, even if they are thinking financially progressive in a personal sense of they want to get themselves ahead financially. They want to make personal financial progress. But if you work to make the world a richer place, you have a richer world to live in. And whatever money you have is worth more in that world, regardless of inflation or deflation, because there's more to go around. If you live in a wealthier world where there is more for everyone, then you could be a poorer person than average in that world, and you'd still be wealthier than you would have been in a less wealthy world if you were of average wealth. And making the rich richer, by the way, is not making the world richer, because that's for one, that's unused wealth. Um, being financially conservative means not investing. I want to be real clear about that. When you see rich people with lots of money and they've got pretty close to all of it invested in various financial endeavors, various, for example, some company wants to grow bigger. They go public and they sell shares of stocks in their company, and wealthy people buy them up. That's not being financially conservative. That's not fiscal conservative. That is being personally progressive. That they're saying, I am going to take a risk on this investment because I know the risk is low and my chances of getting a higher return on my investment are better than the risk. And or at least they think that's the case, because they don't invest in things that they think are going to fail. They invest in things they think are going to succeed and make more money for them. That's not being conservative. But terminology, gets used in different ways, and people hear it being used. Well, these rich people are all conservative. They all say they're conservative. Yeah, and there are dictators who claim that their governments are communist or socialist as well. They're not. They're dictatorships. Those are authoritarian. they're they're not what the people who labeled them made them out to be. They're just not. That's not what those words mean. And yeah, again, if you look at a dictionary, you might find such new definitions ending up in dictionaries, especially when people who have a vested interest in making such definitions seem legitimate, uh, put some of their resources into legitimizing them by getting them into dictionaries. Yes, this happens. Um, the English language is messed up really badly, and that's a big part of why. But language is an interesting thing. I, you know, I've done my share of studying languages. I'm not much of a polyglot. I can't say that I'm fluent in very many languages. I'm not sure exactly how many, but I know the number is small. And it's more than one. Um, Arguably, it might be only two, but then it depends on how you're measuring. Um, but I know bits and pieces of a bunch of different languages, and more importantly to me, I understand how they work. I understand the science of language and the evolution of language. Um, Tammy R says, I was repeatedly called a commie because I was sharing facts about the hot water the former guy is currently in. Yeah, they think that's just like a swear word, you know? That's like, when people use a particular act, a word for a particular act that some people find very pleasant as a swear word. And, they say things that could be mistaken for encouraging that person to reproduce, as a way of speaking against them. And I'm just thinking to myself, have they really thought about the words they're using? Um, but yeah, yeah, a lot of people have been taught to think of communism as just a bad thing. They don't know why. They don't know what it is. They're given examples. They're not given a definition of what communism is. They can't comprehend a definition in a lot of cases. So they settle for these examples and they say, well, this dictator calls his government communist, and this dictator calls his government communist. Therefore, if you want to know what communism is, there it is. That's your examples of what communism is. And you might as well have been pointing out a couple of chefs who decided to call their spaghetti and meatballs pizza as examples of what pizza is. It's like, there you go. You know, that chef says that's pizza. That chef says that's pizza. Now you know what a pizza is. Um, and if you haven't bothered to look up an actual definition of pizza, or better yet, more than one definition of pizza, you might be convinced by such examples if you can find them. And I'm not saying that there are actually chefs out there that call their spaghetti and meatballs pizza. Um, but there are chefs out there who call some of their dishes by names that um, they accept for those things, and most other chefs wouldn't. And the same thing happens in any field, that you get people who use a word in a way that most other people in the field would not consider acceptable. If you point those out as examples of what the word means to people who learn their words not by definitions but by examples, and then they put that into their common usage, yeah, you can shift what a word means to a large group of people that way. It's a terrible, deceptive thing to do, and shame on anybody who does it, because they're causing harm. If you want to do a little experiment, like invent a word that as far as doesn't exist, and put a meaning to it and use it and see if other people will pick it up. I've done that, and it has happened. Um, and long, long time ago. I don't generally do that anymore, because you know I don't see it as inconsequential as I thought it would be back then. As far as I can tell, I didn't actually cause any harm that way, but I did end up with a word that did turn out to actually be in current use, that I didn't realize, because I was spelling it differently, and I looked up my spelling and it didn't seem to exist anywhere. Um, that existing word with a different spelling but very similar pronunciation, um, ended up with a new meaning that is has been for a long time since then in pretty much common usage. Um, so there are consequences to such things. But it's okay to do a little bit of experimenting. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, but don't do it maliciously. Don't do it to try to manipulate people. Um, I mean, for example, okay, and I don't know if I'll ever get this one to catch on, but in a language family of my own, I have a solution for the whole he and she problem of what do you do with, okay, what a lot of people have been doing when they're not sure whether someone should be classified as a he or a she or something else, they call them they. Well, that works. They has historically been a plural word, but then again, you in the English language was also historically plural, and now it's grammatically plural, but it's used both as plural and singular. And so, can the word they be grammatically plural and still get used as plural and singular? Of course it can. And I don't have any problem with that. But in the spare language family, um, he and she exist. They're actually he and she, but basically the same thing. Hi spelled hi looks like the English word hi. Shi spelled ci, um, doesn't look like an English word at all. And the gender epicene of those is li, li. So he, she, and li, him, her, and lem, his, hers, and les. Um, those work in English, and there is a full grammatical solution that doesn't remove the singular and plural distinctions, and works with the possessive um, and the accusative form, and it's that easy to bring it from an existing language or language set, or in this case language family, into another existing language, in this case English, which is much more well established. But I don't generally use it myself. I on rare occasions I do, but I don't generally, because most people don't know what I mean when I do, and it can look and sound a little strange, when people don't know what it is. When if I call into a call in uh, program on the internet or something, and they ask me what are my pronouns, I'll usually just say he, um, because uh, everybody knows what that means. I don't have to explain it. I could go through the effort of saying just because I want to teach people a new pronoun, I'll go with Lee and Lem, instead of he and him. I'll go with Lee and Lem. Why not? Um, I haven't been making that effort. If somebody else sees this or hears this and they think that that is an effort that is worth making to them personally, they're welcome to do that. And if they want to encourage me to make that effort as well, they're welcome to encourage me to do that. I may or may not. But again, it is a solution. And that's the thing. We can have lots and lots of solutions out here for problems that currently exist. And if these solutions aren't getting used, we're not solving the problems. Uh, if well, for example, ranked choice voting is rather well known. It solves certain problems in elections. It creates certain problems as well, but it solves more than it creates in most cases. And some people are pushing for that one. There are better systems out there than a ranked choice voting. For example, the simple approval voting system, which is what I'm talking about when I say remove the vote for only one restriction. That's actually better than ranked choice voting. I mean, take for example what's going on in Georgia right now. Okay, um, they're having a runoff on the U.S. Senate race that happened there. They're they've scheduled a runoff for December 6th, and the Republican Party is pouring a pile of money into hyping up their um, nominated candidate. They know the guy isn't really worth what they're trying to make him out to be. They know he's not really a good candidate, but they're going to try to fool the people into thinking he's a great guy and he'll do everything they want and whatever else they have to fool them into, because they don't want to let the Democratic Party candidate win. They've admitted it openly. They talk about it very openly that that the main thing for them is to just win. They don't care how bad the candidate is. It's all about beating the Democratic Party so that the Democratic Party uh, can't get things done. Well, get things done for whom? Because there's the big question. Because both parties should be serving the people. That's what they're supposed to be there for. If they're not going to serve the people, they should get out of our government. Because we didn't elect a political party, we elected candidates. And those candidates were elected by the people to serve the people, to the extent the people did actually elect them. But let's get back to that one case. In Georgia, they had 3 candidates who got some reasonable amount of votes. One of those 3, I say a reasonable amount of votes, yeah, it was enough to notice that they made a difference. But the difference they made was to prevent either of the other 2 from reaching 50%. If the people had been allowed to vote for more than one candidate, that probably wouldn't have happened. Because more people would have probably voted for that 3rd candidate. But that's because a lot of the people who wanted to vote for that 3rd candidate thought, well, if I vote for that person, then I can't vote for one of these other 2. and one of these other two is probably going to win, and that would be like throwing my vote away. So a lot of the people who wanted to vote for that third candidate most likely chose not to and voted instead for one of the other two. If they could have voted for more than one candidate, they could have voted for that third candidate and for their preferred one of those other two. Now, the way it came out with those other two, I don't remember the exact percentages, but basically one had approximately 49% of the votes and one had approximately 48% of the votes. The one that had the higher percentage of votes was the Democratic Party candidate. So the Republican Party is now pouring a lot of money into fooling the people into electing the candidate who got less votes. And they can do that. They have a chance to do that because there is a runoff going on and they have time to campaign before the runoff. Now, if the people had been allowed to vote for more than one candidate, they could have indicated the vote for the third party candidate if they wanted to, or not third party, but the third candidate. I'm not sure what party, if any, that person had, but they could have indicated a vote for that third candidate if they wanted to, a fourth candidate as well if they wanted to, and one of the two candidates who came out with almost 50% also if they wanted to, or both of those two and none of the lesser known candidates if they wanted to. And whichever candidate got the highest percentage would be the winner. You wouldn't have to have a runoff to get someone 50% because, first off, whoever got the highest percentage would probably already have 50%. And second off, if none of them got 50%, having a runoff wouldn't get any of them 50% because that means less than 50% of the people willing to vote were willing to vote for any one of those candidates. That simple. So the runoff would have already been done in a sense because it would have been done simultaneously with the original vote. But unlike a ranked choice voting with instant runoff, there wouldn't have had to have been a second count either. You count the votes once. You count approval for one candidate a person voted for, approval for a second candidate that person voted for, approval for a third candidate that person voted for, approval for one candidate someone else voted for. They didn't vote for a second one. Move on. Approval for two candidates that person voted for. And when you add up all of that approval, whoever got the most approval wins the election. It's that simple. We already have that, except for the fact that we have a restriction that keeps us from using it. That restriction is the restriction that says don't vote for more than one candidate. Don't vote for more candidates than the instructions on the ballot say you're allowed to. They limit how many candidates a person can vote for. That keeps the people from putting their runoff right into the vote. Now, instant runoff lets you rank them so you can say, well, this is my first choice, this one's my second choice, but it does not allow you to mark them equally, to say these are both my first choice and this one is my second choice and these three are my third choice. You can do that. That's another kind of a system. That would be, I believe that would be the star system, score and then runoff. Is that right? Score. Oh, score then also runoff. Yeah, STAR. I think it's score then also runoff. That would be the star system. Great system if if you want to use that. But ordinary score voting would be a whole lot easier to implement because score then also runoff basically lets you say, I want to put all these candidates as my first. Well, maybe I'm doing the star voting wrong. It might be slightly different than this, but one type of voting would be vote for as many candidates as you want as your first choice, vote for as many as you want as your second choice, vote for as many as you want as your third choice. Or how about just vote for as many as you want and then have the runoff until you get somebody with at least 50%. It's another way of doing it. Again, there are lots of ways we can run elections. What we have is basically the worst of them. And all we'd have to do to make it vastly better is remove that restriction that says vote for only one. And if enough people were to campaign for that, to tell the politicians, look, If you want to keep your jobs, if you want us to even consider voting for you in the next election, fight for this on our behalf. Because if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to try, at least try to help us have better elections in the future, so we don't have to have things like this runoff going on in Georgia and all the money being poured into trying to get the less wanted candidate to appear more wanted. If we shouldn't have to put up with stuff like that. Tammy R says they fooled a lot of people. It's painful to witness. Yes, it is painful. And what's more, a lot of those people will someday realize that they had been fooled. Imagine the pain they're going to go through at that point. When there are some who realize it and then just deny it. They push it aside. They have to live with cognitive dissonance for the rest of their life because they'll never get around the fact that now they know the truth and they will not accept the truth. But there are others who recognize it, they accept the truth, and they have to live with the fact that they acted based on something they were very well convinced of that just turned out to be false. And they also, at that point, are likely to notice that a lot of other people were fooled by the exact same thing. So, on top of the pain of seeing that all those other people were fooled, they also have to deal with the pain of the fact that they were fooled themselves. Wouldn't want to be that person, you know. A lot of people, when somebody does something wrong, they're quick to want that person to be punished for the thing they did wrong. I'm not a big fan of punishment. I mean, if you can punish someone to teach them, great. That's fine. If a person can learn something um, by being punished, okay. If that's the best way you can give them a lesson, use what you got to use and help them to learn. But I am for learning. Punishing for the sake of punishing, I cannot advocate for it. And part of the reason for that is because I do think of what it would be like to be someone else. And regardless of how much somebody at some level in their mind has convinced themselves that they're right, if the evidence indicates that they're wrong, somewhere in their brain, they've got to know that. Some part of their brain is probably already being tortured because it can't get that message to the rest of the brain to say, hey, look, you're wrong. You've been fooled. And, I mean, some people don't care about anybody but themselves, and they don't even care about the parts of themselves they're unaware of. But other people care about people besides themselves. Some care about animals besides humans. Some care about life forms besides animals. I care about the parts of my brain that I'm not necessarily aware of. I mean, sure, I have a rough understanding of brain anatomy and things like that, but I mean, the conscious part of my brain doesn't hear from every other part of my brain directly. Doesn't mean I don't care what those parts of my brain are going through. I don't want to I don't want to allow myself to be deceived and have some part of my brain suffering because I didn't care enough about that part of my brain to look carefully at what I was believing and correct myself when I'm wrong. If some part of my brain can see through that and doesn't have a way to tell me about it, I don't want that part of my brain to have to suffer. And Yeah, maybe that's anthropomorphizing a part of my brain in a sense. But yeah, then again, if you play a role in in a stage play or in a movie or on a television series, um, to play a role well, you have to, in a sense, at some level, sort of become the role that you're playing. Uh, but that's like like when a little kid is playing with a toy car and they're running the car along the wall and pretending that it's got a driver inside and that gravity moves in that direction because that's where the wall is. Not really thinking all this stuff out, necessarily thoroughly, but to some extent, they've got to fool themselves for a little while. But it's also practice to tell the difference between fooling themselves and not, because they can pull away from that later. And if somebody asks them, is there really a live driver in that car? Hopefully they're going to know the answer is no. And if they're asked, does that car really stick to the wall when it rides on when it drives along the wall? Well, they know the answer to that is no. They're holding it there with their hand. If they say, yeah, it does, are they trying to fool you or are they trying to fool themselves? Or maybe they're just playing. I don't see anything wrong with playing, but don't hurt the world you live in. You know, you still got to live in it. I mean, even if only for selfish reasons, don't hurt the world you live in. But even better than that, don't hurt the world other people live in, because someday you're not going to be still living in it, and hopefully other people will be. Hopefully some people will outlive you, because we're mortal. We have finite lives, at least as far as we have actual evidence of, and we can make this world we live in a better place. We can make a better future for other people to live in. And that's the main reason why I make videos like this. I mean, I've got other kinds of videos that I make, and that's probably part of the reason even behind those, because it's a deeply ingrained part of the way I think. But one of the reasons why I created my Eminent Reflection channel, which is one of the two this is being live streamed on, was to highlight other YouTube channels that I thought were worth watching. And while I might highlight some channels for their entertainment value, I probably won't do much of that. I recently made a reflection on Amy Newman's channel, and um, I did point out some of the entertainment value of that channel, but it's also a channel that gets people to think. And I would say that whether I consciously recognized it at the time or not, which I'm not real sure whether I did or not. I think so, but whether I consciously recognized it at the time, I'm sure that was a big part of my reasoning, is the fact that it is a channel that gets people thinking. It gives people stuff to think about, partially through humor, partially through serious discussion, but it does get people to think. And those people who have been fooled, telling them they're fooled is probably not going to do anybody any good, unless they've been told so many times by so many different people that they're starting to think maybe they should listen. But again, one of the reasons why they're able to be fooled is because they're sort of living in an echo chamber. They're not going to likely hear a lot of people telling them they're being fooled. And being the one person who tells them is not likely to help. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I am saying there are probably better ways to handle it, like to talk to them about some of the things that you've learned and some questions that you have, and um, you know, maybe what you can see of value in the things that they believe, what you can see is true, and how um, you don't think it's all true, and why you don't think it's all true. But try to approach them from a perspective where they can see that you're at least attempting to see their point of view and to understand their point of view. Because what's usually going to happen if you tell them that they've been fooled is they're going to think the reason why you think they've been fooled is because you don't understand what they understand and you don't see what they see. That somehow they have been let in on something you're not privy to, and you think they've been fooled because you have been fooled. So maybe a better way to approach it would be to say, I think at least one of us has been fooled. And you would probably think it's me, I would probably think it's you, but could we have a discussion about it and maybe try to figure out what things we can agree on and what things we can't agree on, so that at least we can each have a better idea of, if we are the one who's wrong, what things might we be wrong about? Um, Sadly, I've noticed a lot of such people are not real good with long descriptions like that, or long sentences for that matter, in a lot of cases. Not saying all of them, just, yeah. Uh, well, too many. Too many seem to consider a three-syllable word to be too long to use in most cases, and three-word sentence to be too long to pay attention to. So good luck with that. But we do the best we can, and I look at it this way, and some people might take this the wrong way. If they do, so be it. I know how I meant it, but cats and dogs, pets. You know, some people own them. Some people don't own them, but they come across them in our society. And some people consider them members of their own family and will call them their babies. But if you ask if they're people, they'll say, of course they're not people. I see it a little differently. I think, somebody's pet dog or pet cat is a person. They're not a human, but they are a person. They have a personality unique to themselves, and they have their own point of view, their own thoughts. They might even have some political points of views. How deep those political points of views go, that's a different story. And if you give a pet cat or a pet dog a way of speaking to you, for example, by pressing buttons to indicate words, and if you've got buttons that will speak the words for you, this is something I pushed for a long time, um, in the past, and for quite a while afterward. I figured somebody had to have already been doing it somewhere, and I guess very recently, someone finally did. Christina Hunger, I believe, was her name. Now, I don't know. There may have been others doing it already by that time, but she looked into it. She was a speech pathologist, worked with humans who were having trouble communicating, and she looked into it and came to the conclusion that um, it turns out there weren't other people doing it. Now, was she right? I don't know. But that is what appeared to be the case. And as far as I know, nobody's disputed it yet. Not as far as I know. Not real important anyway. I mean, chances are probably some people had tried it and failed, and other people had tried it and failed, and she had the background to make it work. And there may have been some who succeeded as well, who maybe have tried to tell people about it since then and nobody believe it, you know. But other people have, she's made a book. I forget the name of the book, How Stella Learned to Talk or something like that. And people have read her book, and they taught their some of them have taught their cats and dogs how to use buttons to communicate. Um, I would say arguably some have had better success than she has, and that's going to happen. The process will evolve as it goes from person to person. That people will learn from each other. Some of the things they learn, they will learn wrong, and in some cases, that having learned wrong will turn out to be an improvement. It's kind of how mutations work, and those beneficial mutations in the process will tend to get passed on because they work. Um, but if you were to ask one of those cats or dogs a political question about the world that they live in, a question like do you think the government should spend more money on such and such, or do you think that this particular politician is sincere and honest to the people? You'd be lucky if they could understand the gist of what you're saying. They might. They might understand you very well. With buttons to push to answer you, they're probably not even going to be able to give you a decent answer, even if they've got one. And chances are their brain isn't quite equipped to formulate one in the first place. It's not to say it couldn't be, might be, but we humans tend to sort of assume, and I would recommend not assuming anything if you can avoid it, but we have a tendency to assume that other people understand things as well as we can, as well as we do. And that is like a presumption that it starts out before we even have a chance to think about it and think, is that right or is that wrong? It's first, it's all like me, and then there are these differences, and then there are these similarities within the differences, and it's a building process. But and I might not have the order exactly right there either, but the thing is, it's a multi-stage process where we figure out what someone else can and can't understand. And people who go on prejudice, they never go through that process. They basically go, well, I know what category I put this person in, therefore they're like everybody else in that category, and that's about as far as their brain thinks it through. But but if you consider the fact, if you consider pet cats and dogs as people, and you think of a well-trained cat or dog who's able to hold a conversation, if you've gotten to the point where they have hundreds of buttons they can push to say words, and maybe even thousands, and they know them all, they know where they all are, they've used them all, they've learned them well, there's still going to be some difficulty in the processing of the words you're saying and the grammatical order that you're putting the words in. And their cat brain or dog brain is not likely to keep up with the average human brain. And if you're a person who's understanding everything I'm saying right now and in full detail of is more or less the way I meant it, then chances are the average human brain doesn't keep up with yours either. That's just life. I don't think anybody should take anything like that as insulting. I get lost on some of the simplest things that most other people find easy. Dates and times are difficult to me. Temporal theory, Not really a problem. But a statement like, I'll see you a week from Tuesday. Well, as it turns out, most people don't really know exactly what's meant when someone says a week from Tuesday because they can mean more than one thing. But most people are not as lost by it as I am. They can generally narrow it down in a fraction of a second to one answer they think the person meant. And if they stop to think about it just a little bit longer, they might realize that there's a second possible answer that the person might have meant. And they're probably right about both of those. My brain goes into this sort of recursive thing of, well, Tuesday is a week from Tuesday. There was a Tuesday before today, and there was a Tuesday after today, and those are both Tuesday. And a week from either one of them could be the other. So both of those days could be the day that's meant. And a week in either direction from either of those could also be a week from Tuesday. So basically, they just mean any Tuesday. And that's like my first thought. And then overlapping with that, as I'm having that thought, is something to the effect of, no, they probably mean something more narrow than that. But what? Probably sometime, some week from some Tuesday that might be close enough to today that they'd be likely to talk about it. And even by that point, my brain probably still hasn't ruled out past Tuesdays. If I ever get a time machine, that way of my brain working will work just fine. Because if somebody says, I'll see you a week from Tuesday, and they meant a week before the Tuesday that just passed, my brain will consider that as one of the possible things they might have meant. And in a world where time travel is all over the place, I'll fit in better than most people, at least in that respect. But yeah, I'm stupid when it comes to time in the sense that most people think of it. And I don't mind saying that I'm stupid in that area, in that category, in that sense. And some people are stupid in other areas compared to me. And I don't mean that as an insult to them. I wish none of us had to be stupid in any areas at all, but that's just not what we have. And just as I don't hold it against a cat or a dog that their cat or dog brain can't process language like a human brain can. It can process language, yeah, but not like ours. They'll usually take longer to form a sentence and um, longer to figure out whether or not that sentence is likely to portray what they're trying to say. And that's even if you take away the limitations of like, hey, I've only got a dozen buttons here. How do I say this complicated thing with only a dozen buttons? But we humans, I mean, if we learn a dozen words from a new language, we can still process it faster than probably most um, pets will ever be able to. I mean, pet cats or pet dogs anyway. Pet chimpanzee, well, not very many of those, but they got a little better chance. Um, certain kinds of birds, hard to say. Um, I know there's one, can't think of the name of the channel, but there's a pet bird named Gallagher that someone has that, and she says, say hello, say hi, and the bird's like, hello, hi, hello, Gallagher. Well, the bird's saying hello, Gallagher, because that's a greeting that the bird has learned. Hello, Gallagher. Hasn't quite put together that Gallagher is the bird's name and that you should replace that with someone else's name. So, not a real high level of language processing going on there. And yet, the bird does seem to understand a lot of what is being said. Um, but a lot of it is going to be understood differently than most humans will understand it. And my point in bringing that up is that we humans have differences in our brains as well, both um, differences that are there from genetics and prenatal development and things like that, and also differences that come from the environments we learned in and the things that we happened to be exposed to as we learned. Um, and and then there's combinations of that, like differences in how we learn different things, partially because of our differences in brain anatomy. And some of those differences in brain anatomy are things that would have likely happened regardless of how we learned or what we learned, and other ones are because of how we learned or what we learned. Like, for example, an expert on brain anatomy might be able to easily tell the difference between an expert guitar player and an expert piano player, because there are um, parts of the brain that grow, literally physically grow tools for doing such things. And likewise, our brains grow tools for fluency in a language. So it could be that some people out there are just not capable of understanding what conflating two different words or two different meanings of what seems like the same word, that they're just not capable of comprehending that that what they're doing is conflating, and that those two meanings are not really the same meaning. That maybe the best they can do is to stick a label on it and say it means what the label means, and the label um, the label and the thing it means are the same thing, two different representations of it. And I don't know how that works. My brain doesn't do that. So I would have trouble understanding how they think, just as they would have trouble understanding how I think. It doesn't mean we can't try to see eye to eye, that we can't try to understand each other's ways of thinking. But then there's a question of, do they want to? And when you get to somebody who's a bigot and thinks they're better than you because some category they put themselves in, or because they're themselves and you're not them, um, are they going to want to understand you? Is this something that you can get them to want to do if you talk with them about it? Um, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. Um, and I don't suppose I could, because I think it's going to vary from one person to another. But you can try, and maybe you'll reach some of them. Maybe some of them will understand. Um, but don't feel like you have to reach everybody. Don't feel like you have to make everyone understand. Again, the main topic of this video was to reflect on the concept of supporting campaigns. And I do want to, re-stress that if you've got money to support campaigns with, and you want to use your money for that reason, it's your money. Do what you think is best. But you can support campaigns without money. And you can support campaigns by spending your own money in your own ways that are supportive of those campaigns. And the campaigns you support don't have to be someone else's. In fact, even if they are someone else's, they don't have to be entirely someone else's. You can look at someone else's campaign and you can say, I like this campaign, but I wish this were different about it. I wish it had this feature instead. I wish they would change this thing. And then you can say, well, in my campaign, I will change that thing. I will campaign for something very much like what they're campaigning for. And that will support their campaign because it's very much like it. And in supporting something very much like it, you're showing support for something very much like it. But um, but you can make yours just a little different if you want, and support something closer to exactly what you want, and less exactly what somebody else wanted that maybe was kind of close to something you want, but not quite. Any rate, I've been at this long enough. It's 12:50 now, according to the clock on my microwave oven, and yeah, that one's not in 24-hour time. Um, let's see, if I look on my phone, it says it's 0:50. So they're in agreement with each other on the 50. And you could say they're in agreement with each other on the 12 or the 0 if you recognize that there's some interpretation involved there. But any rate, yeah, I don't know if anybody's still watching. Uh, I know Tammy stuck around quite a while, and um, the freak, um, I don't know, still here or not? Probably left a long time ago, is my guess. And has anybody else been here and watched? I don't know. But anybody's welcome to leave comments um, after the video's over. The comment section should be available, and wherever it is, if you can find it, feel free to leave some comments. I may or may not see them. I would like to say that I will read them all. It's not something I've been good at. Um, if I notice that there's a bunch of them coming in, I will try to make an effort and read all of them. But usually, most of my videos don't get very many comments. And so I usually don't even know that they're getting comments. And I sadly probably miss most of the comments I do get. I don't mean to say that to encourage anyone. I'm just being honest. I will try, um, but I don't know when I will think to look, or will I think to look on this one, or will it be the next video and I'll forget this one, but I'll look at that one. But I do look at least some of the comments, and I will continue to try to improve on that. Um, if anybody has commented in past videos of mine, feel free to come in when I'm live streaming and point out to me anytime in the future that I missed your comment. If I haven't replied to it, maybe I've seen it and I just didn't have a reply to give. But usually if there's not too much to keep up with, I do tend to reply if I can think of anything to say and reply. So at any rate, yeah. So yeah, feel free to do that to help me improve, to get better at that. If you leave comments and I don't reply to at least some of the comments in the video that you left comments in, then there's a good chance I probably missed all of them. And feel free to let me know there are comments in that video, and I can go look for it. And I'll be late, but better late than never, so they say. Not that I trust old sayings, but I think that's pretty much generally true. That's the thing about old sayings. They're starting points. They're not finishing points. They're not all the way to the full truth of something. They're just like a hint for where to start. And so yeah, if there are comments left on videos that I have not replied to anybody's comments on. I hope someone will point that out to me and give me the name of the video and, if possible, about when it was posted. Maybe put that in a comment on a present video. Maybe mention it to me in a live stream if you get a chance, in the live chat. Um, Try to bring it to my attention. Also, you can contact me on Twitter, um, or Instagram. If you direct message me on Instagram, I think it puts it in a holding thing for a while, and I do generally see those eventually, but not necessarily right away. If you send me a direct message on Twitter, if you mention me on Twitter, I will probably see it on either one of my accounts. But again, can't really be sure, because sometimes I get kind of flooded on, the stuff comes in all at once on those. If you at message me, I'm saying, I might see that, I might not, probably will. If you direct message me on either of my Twitter accounts, I should see that. Um, if my YouTube channel eventually gets, if either of my YouTube channels eventually gets so popular that that I get flooded with direct messages in Twitter and can't keep up with them all, then I might make it so that um, I've got to be following someone for them to direct message me. I don't know. I used to have it that way, and the main reason I used to have it that way is because I was getting flooded. Um, I got way too many direct messages, and I could not keep up. Um, but after both of my Twitter accounts have been around for a long enough time, that most people weren't even trying to direct message me anymore, I went ahead and removed that restriction, made it so anybody could, and they've been fine that way ever since then. So far, we'll see how that goes in the future. But yeah, if anybody wants to direct message me saying, uh, certain video of mine that I have um, failed to reply to anyone on, or that maybe there are newer comments. Maybe I replied to someone early on, and then there were newer ones since then, and I haven't replied to any since then in quite a while. Let me know. I will try. Um, see what my health is up to. See what I'm able to tolerate or endure. But in the meantime, I hope I have put some thoughts out there worthy of some people's time, and contributed something to building a better future for us, because that's my intention. There's only so much I can do personally. Um, I have an unusual mind. I have an unusual brain. I have a hard time with things that other people find easy, and an easy time with things that other people find hard. Not saying everything in those two categories, but just kind of in general, that I excel in areas most people don't excel in, and and I have a hard time in areas that most people, I think, can't even imagine having a hard time in. Um, but that makes me valuable, and I have no problem saying that, and I'm not alone in that. Anyone who is different is valuable for being different. And don't get me wrong, people who are pretty much just like everybody else, normal people, are valuable as well. We need a lot of them to make society function, but we've got a lot of them. We don't really need more. We will get more, and there's no shortage. Um, but when it comes to solving problems that your average mind can't solve, um, your average mind may become able to solve those problems with enough exposure to new things, and enough time going by. But some out of the ordinary mind might be able to solve it right now, might already have a solution, or might quickly come up with a solution if somebody just describes the problem to them and says, hey, can you solve this? You know, keep that in mind, that, you know, there is value in diversity, and that is one really important example of it, that minds that are out of the ordinary can solve problems that ordinary minds will fail to solve. It's not to say that every out of the ordinary mind is going to solve every such problem, but being out of the ordinary generally means they're not like each other as well. So chances are some out of the ordinary mind out there can solve whatever problem it is that you're looking at and going, well, nobody knows how to solve this. Chances are there's an out of the ordinary mind, either now or sometime in the future, that will solve that problem given the chance. So value that diversity, because it makes your future better. Thanks for watching.